Hey, so I had a request to do a bit more of a demonstration on how I use this warping paddle on my warping board. So I'm going to attempt to do that for you. So real quick, I wanted to talk a little bit more about what this warping paddle is. It's actually a little section of a rigid heddle. So if you recognize the holes and slots on here, that's exactly how this functions. So when you move it up one way, it splits your threads one way and then the other way. And that's how I work around the cross, is I move the paddle up and down around where I want to put the cross. And what I do is I tell myself to repeat the same direction both ways. I'll show you what I mean in a second. But so if I go down and then up and then come around, down and then up again. So if you do up and then down, come around, up and then down again. So just whatever your pattern is, one direction will be your pattern in the other direction. And if you can remember that, it takes some getting used to, but you'll get a rhythm for it eventually, and then you won't have to think about it so hard. So let me show you how I use this on the warping board. So I have threaded 4 threads in this. I find on a warping board, I can't really manage more than 4 threads and get it on the peg. This will hold, I think, like 20 threads. And if you have a warping mill, that's what this is designed for. You can do that many threads at once and it would be much quicker than what I'm doing, but this is just where I'm at this moment. So this does speed you up a little bit. And if you remember from the video, I have a way of pulling yarn directly off the top of a cone. That'll be really important when you're doing this, because if you try to pull multiple threads from multiple different cones and you're going in sideways directions a lot, and they'll get twisted and it'll knock your cones over and it'll be really frustrating. So make sure you have a way of pulling the thread directly off the top of the cone before it comes to the warping paddle into your warping board. So I used my kids' basketball hoop. You could use anything. I think sometimes I use a drying rack, one of my accordion drying racks. I'll just put cones under there. I've used chairs, just whatever you've got that can help you to do that. So I've tied all those threads together into a group on one side here, and I'm going to go ahead and put this on the bottom peg. I don't know if it's going to show this part, but that's okay, because I think you kind of get the idea of how this works. The challenge with this kind of warping is getting all the threads on the board at approximately an even tension. So I use one hand to kind of make sure all the threads are coming through approximately the same tension. And then I just put it on the board, just as if I'm doing one thread, but I'm doing 4 at a time. So here comes the cross. So I hold, let's see, am I in frame there? Yeah. I hold the paddle sideways so that the holes in the slots can move the threads up and down around these pegs. And my rhythm is I push the paddle down, put it across the first peg, and then up. And that creates a cross. Then you bring it around the end peg, and then same thing. So I'm going to spread that out and go down, put it on that peg, up, and put it on that peg, like that. And then I go back down to the bottom. It just takes some practice. The first few warps I did this way were really slow, and I know my studio assistant, it took her some getting used to as well, because she would do it in my studio and then she'd do it at home. Her warping board was set up differently than mine, so you get comfortable with your setup and you just keep practicing the motions. It becomes a muscle memory and it becomes much easier, but it takes some getting used to. So let me try that again. I'll show you how I did it. So I'm going back on the warping board, going up the pegs. This is for my 6-yard warp. You saw my guide strings. I have 2 guide strings, and the blue guide string is my 6-yard warp. All right, so here we are again. I'm going to push the paddle down and then push the paddle up. That creates a cross. And then I'm going to Bring them all around that peg. Same thing, I'm going to push the pedal down and then push the paddle up to make the cross. And then I go back down. I'll finish that warp here in a minute. But yeah, so the warping paddle isn't designed for this. This is just a technique I came up with because I needed to warp a little bit faster than I could holding 1 or 2 threads in my fingers. It's not perfect. It's not what this is designed for, but it works. And I would recommend, it does make things go a little quicker. If you have 4 cones of yarn and you want to try to do 4 threads at once. If you're just doing 2 threads, I would recommend just getting used to holding it in your fingers because I think the paddle might actually get a little cumbersome for just 2. And it's not very difficult to figure out how to hold 2 threads and maintain them across the board. You don't even have to worry about separating the cross if you don't want to with those 2 threads. You can just pair them together and they'll be paired together when you go to warp them, and that's fine. So hopefully that was a helpful demonstration to you. Ask me questions if you didn't get it. I can always try to demonstrate something again for you if something was unclear. And just one more thing I might point out. I didn't point this out in my demo video, but this is where I make the cross right here. And this is not a cross. This is what they call a false cross. It looks kind of like a cross, but not everything is included. There's some threads above and below, and that's just from the process of going around this peg. When you close the cross, you end up with this false cross. So don't use this one. This is the one you're paying attention to right here.